Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to continue our look at the Philistine War. Last time we ended it right after Joshua's speech in chapter 13 of Judges. And if you haven't seen that video, I would definitely recommend checking it out first, because in that video, I explain the lead up to this war and some important context clues that will be important for today's video. So go check that one out and then come back here and we'll get started. So let's pick up where we left off in Judges chapter 12, verse 11. It says, "The children of Israel again became like the nations of the land. They took each man his daughters and his sons. And when the house of Israel was judged, they went a-whoring after foreign gods. Then the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, so he delivered them into the hands of spoilers, and Hezekiah, the leader of the Philistines, made war against them and took away the spoil as far as Caran." Now, if you remember from last time, we learned that the Philistines were a loose confederation of 5 distinct people groups, united mainly for military purposes. And the spoiler there in verse 11 is most likely a reference to the Ammonite and Moabite people groups that lived east of the Sea of Galilee and the Jordan River. And we can make this deduction because in Judges chapter 14, it says that while Samson was delivering Israel from the Philistines, he killed an Ammonite at the pass of the Garalite with the jawbone of an ass. And the Hebrew word translated ass in this passage is Chema, which is also the name of the people group, the Camarites, who lived near the Ammonites and Moabites, and are often grouped together with them. So, based on this, we can deduce that the spoilers mentioned in Judges 12:11 are likely a coalition of the Ammonites, Moabites, and And if you remember from last time, the Philistines didn't actually have a king at this time, but rather had 5 chieftains, or as the NIV translates it, lords. These 5 lords ruled over their respective territories and had no overall authority over the others. This is why the Philistines are referred to as a loose confederation. So when we read about Hezekiah leading the Philistines into war, what exactly does this title indicate about him? Well, it actually tells us very little, except that he was probably a military leader of sorts. Remember that the Hebrew word translated Lord in Judges 12:11 and throughout the Old Testament is the word Sar, which we know from last time's video means prince or ruler. However, just because he is called a lord or prince does unnecessarily mean that he was a hereditary king or even that he held any civil authority. The word Sar simply means that he was a ruler of some kind, perhaps a military commander or general, and this is further corroborated by the fact that he is described as making war, which is a strictly military action. In fact, when we look at other places in Judges where Sar appears, we see that it is usually translated as captain or captain of thousands or captain of hundreds. And this makes sense considering that the Philistines were organized into military units. When we read in Judges 12:36 that 3,000 of Israel's warriors were leagued together with their confederates and allies, we can assume that these warriors were organized into companies and battalions, and that these companies and battalions were led by officers. And that is what the word Sar denotes here, an officer of the Philistine army. Now, the name Hezekiah isn't exactly a Hebrew name. It looks a bit more Syrian. In fact, the name appears in the Ugaritic texts as a personal name, and the meaning is uncertain. But this is too surprising, since many proper names found in the Old Testament have either a Hebrew, Syrian, or Canaanite origin. And as we learned in part 1, the Philistines weren't a purely Hebrew or purely Canaanite people group, but were a mix of both, which is why they settled in Canaan in the first place. Their name even indicates this, because the word Philistine is a transliteration of the Hebrew word Plutum, plural of Pluta, which means street or suburb. So the Hebrew word for Philistine literally means foreigners or inhabitants of the suburbs. And this is most likely a reference to the fact that the Philistines were originally sojourners in Canaan, who lived on the outskirts of the land. But as time went on, they mixed with the inhabitants of the land, the Hebrews, and eventually became one and the same. So, as we continue to study the book of Judges, keep in mind that the people of the land, the Israelites, and the foreigners, the Philistines, are much more similar than they are different. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and check out my social media. As always, it's been an absolute joy, and I'll see you guys next time.